Hey everybody, my name's Democracy and we're back with more Blood Souls bosses. I have to say, when I looked at the roster for today's video, all I could say was damn, these rankings are really getting good. Let's jump right in at number 39. Today we're kicking things off with my choice for the best tutorial boss in the series. In the previous video I applauded the concept of the Asylum Demon heavily for being an actual obstacle for an early game player in contrast to a boss like Vanguard, but the caveat was the design was a bit overly simple to overcome. GUNDYR doesn't share this shortcoming at all. If anything, he's perhaps a little bit too complex for a starter boss. I say this because that damn spooky transformation halfway through the battle took me off guard so damn bad I ended up panicking and getting killed in my first run, and that's for a veteran of the series. I can't imagine what it would have been like having GUNDYR be your first ever boss in these games. But then again, you'd probably be lucky in that instance because GUNDYR's mechanics are a great tool to teach you the basics of overcoming Souls challenges. The strategy to defeat him preaches patience, well-timed dodges, and even parrying if you're up for it. Then there's the awesome lore theories I've heard about GUNDYR, but I'm gonna save that story for the champ. Even though I'm not as big of a fan of the second phase's erratic nature, I still believe GUNDYR as a whole as a boss to be praised as the best example of a tutorial boss done right in the series. If there's one fight that's never quite been repeated in these games, it's the Old Monk. Let's start with the lore. The Old Monk was the king of Latria alongside his queen who had been entrusted with the protection of the tower's archstone. One day, for reasons unknown, the king left Latria and returned to overrun the place with many demons. What caused this sudden change in motivation? The golden robes that he brought back with him. This cloth is actually the true demon and has been controlling the king. Upon entering the monk's tower, you're met with a cutscene heralding in a player-controlled invader. It appears the demon sucked the last bit of life from the king himself and is now clinging to a new puppet. Of course, because it's player-controlled, it's not a puppet at all. On one hand, the concept of a player-controlled boss is awesome. PvP fights are a blast, so it's really cool FromSoft thought of a way to introduce PvE players to it. But on the other hand, this fight will rely heavily on connection in each player's skill, so your experience here is going to vary greatly. Then there's the fact that PvP in Demon Souls is all but dead these days, so you're much more likely to face the NPC model. Back in the day though, the nervous ascent up the tower to meet your invader was a thrill that was unforgettable. Welcome to Maneaters 2.0. Really, when I think of what the first big challenge is in Dark Souls, I always come back to the Gargoyles. Both the Asylum and Taurus demons are pushovers, and shouldn't even give most new players too much of a tough fight. But the challenge of the Gargoyles is the first true hurdle I think many players struggle to overcome. That's due to the somewhat precarious area, the quick aggression of the first Gargoyle, and the fact that a second one jumps in to gank you halfway through. A gank can be difficult for even experienced players to balance, let alone a new player. But the design is pretty great, with the first Gargoyle having a small enough health pool for you to finish it before the second descends if you're quick enough. So today the Gargoyles aren't much more than a small speed bump for me, but I won't forget the first time I poured blood, sweat, and many resets into reaching my first Bell of Awakening. If you want to talk about an adrenaline-filled romp, one of the best examples in the entire series has to be the Abhorrent Beast. I can summarize his design in a single word: relentless. This beast gives so little reprieve during your fight that you only have the smallest windows to heal. When he's hunting you down, you better get ready for long erratic combos that can be damn hard to dodge effectively. To do so, you have to dodge just at the right moment in the direction of the attacking arm to get behind him. But even then, he's liable to jump away and quickly turn the tables back on you. What I love about this fight is that it requires near perfection in your dodge timing to come out unscathed. There is no way to overcome this beast in melee combat without intense study of his tells. For that, I remember this fight as one of the most demanding and fun in the entire series. When it comes to dragon bosses in Dark Souls 2, there is no doubt in my mind that SINH is the best of the bunch. Whereas bosses like Guardian Dragon are guilty of being too simple and easy, and the Ancient Dragon are guilty of being too hard and boring, the Slumbering Dragon is a perfect mix of challenge and thrills. Just like the Abhorrent Beast, I remember SINH best for being a boss that keeps you on your toes. Whether you're dodging a melee attack to stay in close or waiting for SINH's next drive-by, it can be a great time. The lore of SINH being the object of Shulva City's worship to the point of one idiot impaling it with a spear causing the dragon to unleash toxic fumes that would be the city's doom is the kind of thing you could flesh an entire game story around. My only knock on the entertainment and design is that it can be a real pain when SINH gets stuck in a cycle of constant flying away from the player. Cause you know, gotta attack now!
Aggressive.
But really, despite any annoyances, it's a lot of fun and a damn great fight. Considering how low I put Blue Kool-Aid on this list, seeing the OG Smelter up this high may come as a bit of a surprise, but when it comes to well-designed fights in Dark Souls 2, this demon is undoubtedly a great example. I've heard of many that find the flames draining your health to be bullshit, but I actually like it. That kind of mechanic puts pressure on the player to be ultra aggressive against the boss, which is something I relish. When you mix that in with the demon's oddly delayed attacks, you could find yourself with a big challenge like myself. Honestly, a lot of my annoyance with the boss comes more from the run up to him, just like the blue variant. I'm not sure how it is in the non-scholar version, but in my game, I had to face so many fucking knights just to get another whack at the thing. Ah well, it's worth it for the opportunity to overcome such a demanding challenge. This is a boss I'm fairly certain is universally hated by most Bloodborne players. Considering it came third as the worst boss in our Bloodborne community rankings only to the Witches of Hemwick and Mikolash, I would say this is accurate. But hey, I love this damn potato. In a lot of ways, I think this fight can be compared to the Deacons of the Deep. You fight many small minions to get to the real boss, and the boss relies on its minions to keep it safe. Where this fight far surpasses that is giving the boss an actual means of defending itself. Not to mention those baby spiders can outright demolish you if you aren't careful. And that's what I really love about this fight. It feels like a very precise juggling act that requires you to have a constant eye on Rom to watch for its magic while you safely try to slaughter its offspring. Effectively pulling off this juggling act is extremely satisfying for me. In fact, one of my Bloodborne hobbies is helping people slay this potato in co-op. Seriously, I never get summoned more frequently these days than I do in Byrgenwerth. So don't be ashamed to ring your bell. You might just summon Democracy the Potato Masher. Are you ready to be penetrated? Well, if not, too bad, because you're gonna have to get good if you want to avoid this guy's rod. In all seriousness, this is the first great example in the series of a humanoid knight-type boss. It's definitely primitive when compared to the later examples in the series, but it's still a rewarding battle. I think my favorite part of the entire encounter was learning his moves and getting better as the fight went on. I went from barely being able to dodge to rolling all around the guy and getting in some good hits. It's actually a very clever skill check to prepare you for what's to come in the highest tower of Boletaria. Speaking of bosses protecting the highest point of a castle, we've got the Dragonslayer armor. Fighting this shell of armor is downright epic. The music, the force behind the blows this boss delivers, the massive shield blocking your petty attempts at damage, the incredibly nimble movement, everything about this fight makes it ooze an atmosphere that gets your blood pumping. The only problem I have is the butterfly whatever thing off in the distance. From my understanding, it's actually controlling the armor, but it still takes time to get some pot shots in with you with some fireballs. I consider these more of a disruption than anything else, and I think they take away from the battle. Not only that, but they make it quite difficult to balance everything that's going on, perhaps to the point of even bordering on bad design. But that's only a very small portion of the fight, and the effect isn't too bad, so I couldn't bring myself to dock this thrilling duel too heavily. Boy, if you want to talk about tragic boss fights, this one has got to be up there. For starters, EBRIETAS won't even fight you at first. You have to beat on her a little bit to the point where she feels the need to defend herself. And you know why she's so defeated? Because the Healing Church has been poking, prodding, and experimenting on this great one for an undetermined amount of time. Presumably, we can infer that this is the source of the Church's continued blood healing. So what we've got here is a blood mule. That makes me feel terrible for this creature, but at the same time motivated to put it out of its misery. And that is definitely something easier said than done. EBRIETAS, in my opinion, is without a doubt the hardest boss in Bloodborne's main story. The challenge is very fair too, but it's hard not to get frustrated at the high damage output and the wide cones of attack. You've also got to be ready for her spells and quick movement or you're in for a one-shot. But as I mentioned previously, I like fights that keep you on your toes in a good way, and this battle certainly does that well. When it comes to actual fights, FLAMELURKER is probably deserving of consideration for the best in Demon Souls. It's a shame the lore isn't much more than him being an imp that protects the dragon god. But if lore isn't your thing and an absurdly aggressive boss is, you're in for a treat. There is without a doubt no boss in Demon Souls more ferocious than FLAMELURKER. You have to fight desperately for any moment of downtime, which can lead to insane difficulty. This is balanced well through on-point dodging and clever use of the arena for crowd control. The only downside to FLAMELURKER is his weakness to magic. If you come down here with the purple flame shield in the royalty class, you might actually call FLAMELURKER a pushover. But when faced in pure melee combat, there are few bosses in the series that are as demanding as FLAMELURKER. Easily the best of the Lord Soul bosses in Dark Souls 2, the Sinner is a battle of many faces. You can either face her in the dark, in the light, or even in New Game Plus with some extra resistance. No matter how you do it though, this is a really enjoyable duel. The lore is quite good too. The Sinner apparently tried to light the first flame long ago. It's not completely clear to me what happened, but the result was the Sinner being mightily shamed for doing this to the point of locking herself in a torture outfit of her own design. Perhaps the only thing that drags the experience down are the questionable hitboxes, though I have to rectify my error from the boss ranking series thinking this was a bad hitbox. Turns out that's just the parry window for the Sinner, so not a bad hitbox, but definitely a herky-jerk animation. But even with its flaws, it's still a battle I remember fondly. Speaking of Dark Souls 2 fights that I remember fondly, the Looking Glass Knight is one of the best in the game. First, let's just mention the arena. Fighting a massive Metal Knight in the rain and lightning is quite an incredible sight. The fight itself is similarly incredible. You have to balance your blows carefully around his huge mirror shield, sword, and thunderous magic. And of course, halfway through the fight he summons help, whether it be player or NPC. While this mechanic is really cool, it leaves the knight himself far too open to attack, and it's fairly easy to kill him quickly before the summon has a chance to do anything. That mixed in with the average lore about simply being another test of those seeking the throne in Vendrick kept the knight from cracking the top 25. I'm really curious to see how you all feel about this placement. From what I've read in the comments, Pontief is either a boss you all really love or fucking hate. I can see both sides well. On one hand, this battle is very demanding like FLAMELURKER or Abhorrent Beast. If your dodging isn't absolutely perfect, you could be stun locked to a quick death. This kind of challenge is something many players appreciate. On the other hand, you could consider it a bit unfair that he's able to chain together so many blows effortlessly and that it's too much to expect players to dodge effectively. I say it falls somewhere in between. There are certainly times where I'm screaming at my TV when Pontief goes beast mode, but more often than not it's my own fault for poor dodging. Then there's the twisted lore of Sullivan conquering the profane capital and ultimately capturing Gwendolyn as an offering to Aldrich, the deity that Sullivan would rally an entire cult around worshipping, and he stands strong in the church to protect this so-called god. So there's definitely a lot of satisfaction in taking this madman down, but it's hard to ignore the minor shortcomings in the experience. And this is the one I'm most interested to see feedback on. Many of the comments I've read from you all guessing the top 10 include KALAMEET, but for me he just barely enters the top 25. To bring even more subjectivity to it, the thing keeping out of the top 10 isn't an unfair challenge, bad design, or a boring fight, because I think the complete opposite of those things. KALAMEET is a damn fair challenge, and without question the best designed dragon fight FromSoft has ever made. That makes it an enormously entertaining bout from start to finish. What makes it a bit questionable for me is the lore. From my own understanding, the dragon is a symbol of calamity. Okay, well, then what is he doing sitting around in the royal wood? Maybe he brought doom to Uasil and is recharging? I have no idea. But when you represent chaos and destruction, I'm not sure why you aren't off busy, well, destroying shit. With this in mind, I don't think it adds a lot more to the fight other than knowing you're taking on a legendary dragon, which I guess is pretty cool. But in the end, it doesn't matter too much. Number 25 is still better than over 100 other bosses in the series, recognition that this fight certainly deserves. Well everyone, I hope you enjoyed this entry in the boss ranking series. We've only got 2 more episodes to go and we've come down to the wire. Checking out what we've got remaining, the boss numbers are fairly even, but there's still a clear lean toward Bloodborne, Dark Souls, and especially Dark Souls 3. So if you're new here, I encourage you to subscribe to see how it all shakes out and for more great Blood Souls content on the horizon. And as always, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.